A rich man had his sights set on demolishing an old shelter house and converting it into a prominent entertainment center to expand his business. However, his plans took a U-turn when he stepped inside and noticed a childhood picture of himself. Millionaire businessman Jordan Morgan was a highly ambitious and stringent man who wouldn't stop until he had what he wanted, and these days his sights were set on transforming a homeless shelter in his hometown into a big entertainment center. Jordan's action was somewhat ironic given that he had risen from poverty to make a reputation for himself. He started out as a loader and worked his way up to owning a large construction company. However, now that Jordan was dead set on making his dream of establishing an entertainment center a reality, he'd go to any stretch to achieve it. And so he wanted to buy the land where the shelter home stood. Residents of the shelter protested, claiming the shelter was a beacon of hope for the underprivileged in their only home, and due to that, the matters escalated into a legal battle. One morning, Jordan was on his way to the court brimming with happiness because that would be his D-Day. The court was about to pronounce the ultimate verdict in the case and Jordan couldn't wait for it. However, just as the verdict was going to be revealed, a dramatic commotion inside the courthouse erupted, with homeless people criticizing Jordan, and the court was adjourned until the next hearing. Jordan walked out of the courtroom annoyed that his plans had been thrown off but confident that the court would soon rule in his favor. As he approached his car and was about to settle inside, an old man approached and grabbed his hand. You can't take our home away from us," he yelled, trembling. "You're forcing multiple families and their children to sleep on the streets for a few dollars. Don't make that mistake, young man. The most important thing in the world is not money, it's coming together and being friendly to one another." Jordan smiled mockingly as he yanked the old man's hand away. "So a man who can't afford to feed himself is lecturing me about money? Hey, I'll give you a piece of advice. Why don't you start packing your belongings as soon as possible, because that piece of land will be mine. No one's gonna be able to stop me, so get out of the way." Jordan sat down in his car and instructed his driver to start it. The unfortunate old man kept pleading with him and even ran behind the car, but his cries went unheard. A few minutes later, Jordan's car pulled over to the side of the florist when he bought a huge bouquet of the most exquisite flowers he could find before heading to the hospital where his mother was admitted. She recently had heart surgery and Jordan wanted to share the good news about how he planned to establish an entertainment complex in his hometown, thinking it would lift her mood. However, telling the news to Mrs. Morgan, her face fell. "Jordan," she said quietly, "how can you demolish a house that houses so many needy people?" "Come on, Mom, do you even realize how valuable that property is? If I developed an entertainment center there, I'll be able to extend my business there and we'll be able to examine proposals for a township." "But honey," Mrs. Morgan was about to say something when she began to feel uneasy. Jordan was quick to observe this and called a doctor who advised him to let Mrs. Morgan rest. The doctor later told Jordan that Mrs. Morgan was still recovering and speaking too much could strain her heart. At home that night, Jordan decided that before the court issued its final ruling, he would conduct a tour of the shelter home to establish a basic plan for carrying out the construction there. He arrived at the site with his secretary at about 10 a.m. the next morning and began explaining to the builders how he wanted to proceed with his proposal as they entered the shelter home. Suddenly, an old woman came up to him. She was walking with a cane, her clothes were soiled, and she couldn't have been younger than 90. She didn't say anything but just stared at him for a moment before smiling. "Oh no, look at you! You've grown up so quickly, but you haven't changed one bit. You're the same little Jordan I remember from years ago." "Excuse me, I don't think I know you. Have we met before?" Jordan inquired, lifting his brow. "Of course, dear," she answered with a smile. "This is the place where your father and mother exchanged wedding vows. One of the rooms in the shelter was used for wedding ceremonies by the impoverished in our neighborhood. And now you want to demolish this building? Don't do that, dear," she blurted, suddenly teary-eyed. "Don't hurt the souls of the poor people who live here." "Nice story, ma'am. Please move before I ask my secretary to throw you out of there." The old lady's face fell. "Please, I beg you, we don't have anywhere else to live. Where would I go at this age?" she begged. But Jordan didn't even care once. He motioned for his secretary to get rid of the elderly lady and moved into the next room. Stepping inside, he began surveying the room with the builders, detailing the next stage of his construction plan when his gaze was drawn to a wooden shelf in a corner that held a few framed photos. He scanned the shelf from top to bottom when a photograph on it caught his eye. He took up the frame to look at it and couldn't believe what he saw. "How's this even possible? Why is there a picture of me and Mom here?" he wondered, holding the frame that contained a picture of a much younger himself with his mother. Mr. David, the shelter's owner, who was also touring the facility with Jordan and his crew, observed him standing in one corner with a photograph and grinned. "Are you okay, Mr. Morgan? Seems like the photo's familiar to you," he said as he approached him, smiling. "How did this image end up here?" Jordan inquired, desperate for an answer. "Why is there a picture of me and my mom in such a dingy place?" Mr. David smiled and said, "I've been working here for the past 40 years, and even though I'm an old bird, I'll never forget the folks who lived here. Jordan, your mother was one of them," he revealed. "She came here when you were a year old. She said that her husband had died and that she had nowhere to go. We took her in and she reared you here until she could get a job and buy a house. I think you were 3 when she left this place." Jordan couldn't believe what he was hearing. He was aware that his mother had raised him with difficulties and they'd been very poor in the past, but he had no idea he was about to demolish the home where his mother had once sheltered him when they couldn't afford a new one. Jordan felt terrible and made a life-changing decision that day. After a few days, the court concluded the land was Jordan's and that he may build on it. People began cursing him in the courtroom, accusing him of being cold-hearted and harsh. "Order! Order! Silence in the court," the judge said. Then Jordan raised from his seat and turned to the people present in the courtroom, which included Mrs. Morgan in a wheelchair who was recently discharged. "I apologize to everyone," he screamed at the top of his voice. Suddenly, there was a pin-drop silence in the courtroom and all eyes were fixed on him. "I'm sorry," he repeated. "I was so consumed by greed that I forgot how to be human to others. The land I fought for is now mine, but I will not carry out any construction for personal gain. In fact, I intend to renovate the shelter in order to make it more suited for the helpless and needy. I'm sorry, Mom," he continued. "I'm so horrible that I didn't realize I was about to demolish the structure where my widowed mother took refuge and raised me 32 years ago. I apologize once more to everyone whose sentiments I have hurt. I'd like to make amends for my faults by providing jobs to the shelter residents so that they may properly raise their children. I've realized that there are several things in life that are more important than money. They are love, kindness, and unity." The old man who'd previously asked Jordan for help was present in the courtroom. As soon as Jordan's speech ended, the old man rose from his seat and began clapping. Others followed suit and Mrs. Morgan was shedding tears of pride for Jordan's wise decision.